so much for taking time from your busy schedule to join us for this amazing webinar where we explore the future of education. What's going on now, what's going on tomorrow, and maybe even forecast a little bit what could happen in the future. My name is Dr. Lance Ford, and I'm an education advocate for Cisco, but I'm also a public school teacher functioning in rural Southeast Oklahoma. As we go through our conversation today, I'm going to start by sharing with you a little bit about how these tools work in my classroom and how I reach my learners day in and day out as a part of that 7:55 a.m. class I teach. And then we're going to transition to what others are doing. We'll visit with some K-12s, with some higher ed institutions, not only from here in the States, but around the world. And last but not least, we will turn our attention to some expertise from Cisco to really kind of get a gauge on how is Cisco responding to this pandemic for folks in education specifically. How are they working through the software and the hardware that they have and making it more education viable, making it more of a teach-nology instead of a technology. I hope you'll join us and stay with me for the entire time. We look forward to getting your feedback at the end of this. And again, thanks for joining. Hey, hello everyone. I want to say thank you first and foremost for taking time from your crazy, busy schedule to join me for this brief conversation around how classrooms are being transformed in the face of the global situations that we currently find ourselves in. My name is Lance Ford, Dr. Ford. I tell people all the time, I don't care what you call me, as long as when it's time to eat, you call me, okay? What I do is teach, and it's what I've been doing for 27 years of my life. I'm a classroom teacher in a small rural school district in Southeast Oklahoma. In fact, let me show you where that is. Okay, Webex, share my screen. Now, I've zoomed in here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm making a recording from my office right here at the school. However, that's the playground, and it is outside that door right there. In fact, you may hear voices at some point. Those are not the voices in my head, although there are some there. Those are the voices of students outside my door. There's a railroad track that's about a half block away. It's right here, okay? And you may hear the train. I have no idea what all will happen during our time together, but I can guarantee you one thing, it's never a dull moment as we're having conversations like this, okay? Now, if you're a student in our school in the face of COVID, we are having a lot of different opportunities and ways for you to actually participate in our classroom environment. In fact, there are 4 different ways that you could be a student this fall at our school district. And these 4 ways mirror the ways that I see so many organizations globally offering courses for their learners. So I'm going to give you a few notes, just like I normally would in class, and I'm going to use the exact same tool that I would use for that. This is Webex Teams. I'm going to bring up a whiteboard, and we're going to kind of talk about the options that you have. Option number 1 is on-site. Man, we would love to have you here on site with us. However, you're going to need to be socially distanced from your peers, from your friends. You're going to need to wear a mask as a part of that so you don't contaminate someone else. You're also going to have a little different bell schedule than you've had, maybe a little different cafeteria experience than you've had. So things don't look quite the same in what is now our on-site instructional experience. At the other end of these opportunities is what we call our virtual learning opportunity. Our virtual learning opportunity is 100% asynchronous. So in other words, if you join our virtual learning opportunity, you will still have classes, but you'll be taking those classes at your own speed and determining the times of the day where you'll be taking them. Now, if you need some help, we'll talk about how you'll get that help in just a moment, and you can have some live help from classroom teachers, but this is really meant to be a self-paced environment. Somewhere in the middle of this is what we call our blended or hybrid learning environments. Our blended or hybrid learning environments provide students an opportunity to take some classes that would be asynchronous, but to also be on site for specific AP courses and a specific instructor, or maybe athletics, or maybe the music class that I teach. I know that a lot of the students that I have right now are in this blended hybrid environment. They come from music class, and then they may be concurrently enrolled at the college. They may be taking an agriculture class, and then they may sit in a particular location on campus at our learning commons and work on some of their asynchronous classes as well. And then last but not least, we now have this other option, which is distributed. Okay? And in distributed, this is where we have students who are sometimes physically in the room with us, and then at other times they're physically joining us, but they're joining us via live synchronous video. Why would that be an environment at all? Well, in this particular world that we find ourselves in today, part of the reason is because they may have been exposed to COVID. I have a young lady right now who was here physically on Monday and now has had to leave the class and join from home live via video because of that particular situation. So there are a lot of different ways that a student could join a course here on our campus. Now, what does that mean to faculty? I know I've got a lot of faculty members, teachers who are watching this thinking, oh my gosh, if you're telling me I've got to teach in 4 different environments, I'm going to be pulling my ever-loving hair out. All right, I got that. Let's talk about what it means for us. What it meant for us was we had to find a tool set that first and foremost was simple, easy to use. Something that didn't take a lot of time to get up and going. Something that presented itself as, for lack of a better way to say it, a big green button signifying go, let's start class. We also had to find something that was scalable. Some of our instances are, like my class, 50 or so students. Some instances may be more along the lines of 10 or 15 students. There may be some lab classes. There may be some hands-on processes. We may need to have speech pathology, which we now do, offered from our speech pathologist to the home. That's got to be a secure environment. There may be IEP meetings that happen where we're looking at individual education plans for students with specific needs and or disabilities. All of that needs to be operated on the same tool, but secure. And let's take it a step further. In a COVID world, we're not able to have physical attendees to some of our sporting events. Provided we're able to have those sporting events, we still want grandma to be able to watch it. We want mom and dad to be able to see it. We need to scale this tool to be able to deliver those events to those folks in their homes. Concerts, performances, things like that, where traditionally people would come and to a venue and watch, we now need to be able to distribute that. So it had to be scalable. And then last but not least, here's a phrase that I use in Oklahoma that may not be appropriate to you, but you may have heard your granddad say it. It is more than a one-trick pony. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that, yes, we can use it for live synchronous engagements, but we can also use it for asynchronous moments of time, recordings. And of course, those recordings have to be transcribed, and they also have to have closed caption to meet our ADA requirements. We need to work in large groups, and we need to work in small groups. We need to have breakout groups as a part of this experience. I need to be able to have file contribution, not only live during the class, but after class, because I don't want to throw out project-based learning and digital portfolios where students are demonstrating their knowledge, not simply regurgitating facts on an exam. So the tool suite that we settled on to do these things is the Webex tool suite. Now, I'm not saying that it's the only tool suite, but it is the core of everything that's going on. And as we kind of explore what Webex is and what Webex does in my classroom, I'm not here to say it's right or that it's the only way to do it. I'm here to say that it was easy, that it was scalable, and that it was more than a one-trick pony. Okay? Now, we've already started by giving some notes to class, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, Webex, share my screen. Now, I'm over here at the board sharing the screen with you now, and you see that I have provided this verbiage. And the reason I put this on a line, a continuum line, is because this is the most traditional, what I would say, strict end of the spectrum. And this end of the spectrum is the most self-paced emerging end. And in between those two are where we find our newest opportunities for our learners. But I might just as easily be using this to draw notes on a staff in my music class, okay? As a part of that experience, I need to be able to distribute that information directly to my learners. So I simply chose to post the snapshot. That means that no longer are students required to come up with their cell phones after class and take pictures, or maybe I erase something. I love this board for me as a teacher because it truly is infinite. Whether you're a math teacher or science teacher or even a music teacher like me, it seems like there's never quite enough white space to be able to get all the things you need to enumerate and list for your learners out there. And maybe it's not just an up and down process, maybe it's an east and west process as well. As I'm moving this around, you see that this board in its scope and capability is infinite. So I can continue to provide those notes and then take that snapshot just like this, and everything that I've drawn is now encapsulated directly into those notes for class. So I'm using a tool that many of you already have in your classroom environments. Okay, Webex, stop sharing my screen. That tool is a Promethean board, okay? So you have probably maybe a smart board or a Promethean board or a projector or something like that already as a display in the front of your classroom. Guys, we have got to rock what we've got. I mean, in this world of education, you know dollars are tight. And so we've got to be able to repurpose not only the hardware that we've procured, but the skill set that we have learned as faculty members to be able to deliver this content in this digital distributed world where we find ourselves. So rocking what I've got is a huge component of that experience, okay? Now, not only rocking what I've got from a, like I said, a technology perspective, but also rocking what I've got from a conversational perspective. I think so many times when we get into a distributed learning environment, folks begin to throw out their best teaching practices because they're afraid that something could go wrong or it simply wouldn't work or something like that, okay? I'm a big two-way communicator as a part of my learning strategy. I expect that individual learners will communicate with me dynamically, live, and like I said a moment ago, as an individual in this experience. So to that end, we have got to find ways, repurposing the same tool, to make that a reality. So what I'd love to do real quickly is just bring up my laptop for you. And I'd kind of love to show you what it might look like inside a live classroom experience. Now, I brought up Webex, and I have several cameras attached here. You may only have one camera, and that's fine. You can choose whichever camera you want. But I'm going to start my class. And the first thing you'll see is this guy, the Webex Assistant.
Webex Assistant is enabled to save audio highlights.
Now, the reason Webex Assistant is so important is not just because of audio highlights, but also because I have learners who have challenges with being able to hear. So everything that I am saying is being put into a closed caption for those learners. They have the ability to adjust the font size as a part of this experience. They have the ability to decide that they would like to use maybe a different background for this experience. And in the not too distant future, I'm looking forward to another pop-up window here that will say something like languages, where I can continue to speak in English and my learners can choose the language that best suits them for the closed captioning. So all of these things are built into my Webex environment. Now, how do we enable that individual contribution? Well, first and foremost, we have the ability to chat with each other. So I can determine if I want my students to be able to chat with everyone, or if I want them to be able to work with individually with others, or if I want to make sure that for my less mature learners, they can only chat and message me. But I still get individual feedback. How else can I do individual feedback? Polling. How about the ability to open up a poll, ask a question, record individual responses, and make that a part of the pop quiz that is in their gradebook? How about breakouts? Being able to enable a breakout session, or maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3, where students, and that's who would be listed here, can be moved to a particular group. Now, you saw when I brought that up that there was an automatic assignment. That works great with some of my older learners, but quite honestly, with my younger learners, part of the challenge is those personalities don't always mesh with each other. So having the ability to assign them to those breakouts manually is huge. They're provided a prompt that says you've been assigned to a breakout. They join that breakout session, and guess what? All the polling, all the chat, their peers who are here. I happen to be the host of the entire live class, so I have the ability to message out to individuals or to different groups. They have the ability to raise their hand as a group and basically say, I need some help here, Dr. Ford. Now, we've started a little bit of this session by saying we can poll, we can message, but we can also...
Assistant is enabled to save audio highlights.
And every time we come back to the large group, you'll hear that. We've talked about polling, we've talked about messaging, chatting. We also, though, have some other opportunities where we can actually share some content with our learners. Maybe this Google Earth will do. And not only as a teacher begin to annotate, but also provide the students the opportunity to annotate. They also have a selection tool, and we use this selection pointer a lot because you see that when I click on things, it actually provides my name. So I might have multiple questions up here, or multiple answers to a single question, or maybe it's a Venn diagram. What do you want to talk about today? What is your biggest concern? Which is the appropriate answer? Highlight the animal that begins with the letter E. Those sorts of things. Those are other ways that we solicit individual feedback. We also, though, have the ability to give our students an opportunity to not only annotate, but also control the environment. For those of you who are teaching pieces of software like spreadsheets or Word docs or things like that, giving a student the opportunity to control it and demonstrate their knowledge effectively for everyone individually is huge. Because truly, you all, this is a distributed learning environment. Now, what's the big deal? Why do I keep saying distributed learning environment? Why does anyone care? Well, let's talk about it. Prior to COVID, I might have 30 learners, but I would be in one learning environment where I controlled everything from the temperature to what they saw, to what they could do, to their ability to get out devices, to their ability to interact with those devices. I had all control in the classroom. Now I have 30 learners, but I have 30 different environments where I control absolutely nothing about their environment. It is incumbent on me to get them individually involved in the class experience. And by the way, the ways that we looked at a moment ago to get involved also include just simply turning on your camera and giving me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or an I don't understand as a part of nonverbal feedback. Nonverbal feedback is a really big deal because in a distributed learning environment, unlike a classroom, if everyone talks at the same time, I'm not able to make sense of anything that's going on. It's only when I can hear from one at a time that we can make sense of the audio that's coming in here. So non-verbal feedback is mission critical to driving quality engagement in a distributed learning environment. Now, we've come through a lot of things. We've looked at some of the hardware that was already in the classroom. We've looked at the Webex tool. We've looked at actually diving into a class session and what that might look like. But some of you are also using different learning management systems as a part of your online course delivery. First and foremost, if you're using it for online, I would strongly encourage you to begin to use it as the rich media hub for your in-person, on-prem classes as well. And there's a reason for this. Come over here with me for a second. I spent 4 years of my life working on this every other weekend from this chair and this desk. That's from the University of Oklahoma. And it was, like I said, a long 4 years. It was a great 4 years. I learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned was there should be no second-class citizens in a classroom. And we define our classrooms now not only as the physical location where we stand, but all the adjoining participants from their distributed learning locales. We want to make sure that they, as well as we here in the classroom, get the content in the exact same way to level the experience. Otherwise, we've got an us and a them. And the them can get pretty ticked off, I guess, when you as a teacher walk into the classroom and say things like, and I've heard this, okay, today we're going to talk about, oh no, I forgot to make copies. Okay, I'm going to go down to the copy machine. They come back, they're passing out the handout, and then they might look at the camera and say something like, I think, well, Susie, would you take a picture of this with your phone and send it to Tom? Tom, would you then pass this out? Look, if we get to that part of class, then those of us who are at a remote site truly feel like we were not even accounted for as a part of the live class experience. So leverage those online portals in the classroom for the experiences that provide true equity between yourself, the people who are here, and the remote learners. Now, from a learning management system perspective, there's as many learning management systems as Solomon had wives, no doubt, okay? Some of you are using tools like Blackboard. Blackboard is a great learning management system. It's been around for a long time. But the important thing to note is that in the Blackboard environment, we can leverage the Webex environment. All the recordings automatically go into the Webex environment. Or Schoology. Some of you all are in a K-12 environment. I still want to be able to leverage that environment with all the meetings and all the recordings. Some of you are using Canvas. Some are using Brightspace, Desire to Learn. Some of you are using Moodle. Okay? It shouldn't matter what tool you're using. It should work the same. I teach for multiple entities, like we talked about up front. The university entity utilizes Blackboard. The e-text that I use was actually written in Moodle. My courses here use Google Classroom. Some of our elementary instructors are utilizing Seesaw. We're back to that rock what you've got conversation where we've got to encourage folks to say, stay where you are, keep the knowledge base you already know, and let's scaffold onto that with where we want you to go as we deliver in these distributed and hybrid learning environments. Now, I know I've been all over the world today talking about different technologies and the way that they work in my classroom. And I told you right up front, that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it the only way to do it. And for you, it may not even make it the best way to do it. But I'm encouraging you. No, I'm begging you. Keep it simple for your faculty members. Keep it scalable for your organization. And make it more than a one-trick pony whatever road you go down, so that the skill set, the people who are using it, when they acquire that skill set, they can really begin to expand what they do. And don't just make it a COVID response. Look at opportunities to change the culture with what you do. Again, thank you for taking time from your schedule to watch this, and I look forward to hearing from you individually. My Cisco email is lanford@cisco.com. I'll see you soon. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I love having this format because there's such amazing content out there. And sometimes we're able to find amazing recordings that we can bring to you to further underscore what's going on with emerging technologies in teaching and learning. You know, there was a recording that was actually an interview with Aruna Ravachandran. She's the Cisco Webex CMO and the VP of Marketing. She did this interview with Phil Ventimiglia. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at Georgia State University. What I'd love for us to do is kind of peek in on that interview and see how the folks there at Georgia State are dealing with this new way of education. Let's take a look.
I'm very excited to welcome you all to our panel on scaling technology for the future of education. Phil, welcome. Can you give us a little bit of more color about yourself, your roles and responsibilities at Georgia State?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I'm Phil Ventimiglia. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Georgia State University. In this role, I have responsibilities for all of the technology at the university, so traditional CIO, but in addition, my role is created to help drive what is the future of higher ed and how technology is impacting that future.
So give us a little bit of more color. Before the COVID era, how did the future of education look like at Georgia State?
Yeah, we've been on a journey these last couple of years to really introduce technology into more of our pedagogy of how we teach and learn, and then in addition, use more technology and high performance computing to support our research efforts. And so in terms of teaching and learning, we've been focusing on both how you teach and what you teach. So we've been incorporating digital literacy into our core curriculum, going and using technology to extend the learning process through both synchronous and asynchronous capabilities so that you can go and do more flipping of the classroom and hybrid learning to really extend the number of hours that you have. A traditional class only has 3 hours a week. And so how can we drive more learning and optimize those 3 hours a week face-to-face through the use of technology?
Yeah, what you're telling me is that even before the COVID era, you had actually implemented a lot of various different technologies in order to basically help embrace both synchronous as well as asynchronous learning. Is that right?
Yes. So for example, we've been doing a bunch of work to go and build out our classrooms of the future, which are more active classrooms. So really designed for flipped and hybrid environments where we go and digitize the learning content instead of having students sit in a lecture hall just to be primarily spoken to, going and recording that, making that more interactive, and then having those 3 hours a week be a much more interactive and experiential learning environment with a lot more technology, computers for classroom projects, presentation, everything mobile and on wheels. So you can rearrange the classrooms. We've been building out those active classrooms. In addition, we're in a unique position. Our campus is in downtown Atlanta, and most of our buildings, including our classroom buildings, are adaptive reuse buildings. So they're former office spaces, and we've adapted them to be classroom buildings. As such, we have actually very few large lecture halls. So we have, you can count on one hand the number of lecture halls that hold more than 150 people. And so even before COVID, we were on a journey to go build out what we call our simulcast classrooms, which allow us to go and stream or simulcast classes so that you could have 50 or 100 students sitting in a classroom and then another couple hundred sitting in the library, a dorm room, or wherever they may be, in a fully interactive capability with the ability to raise hands, ask questions, and the ancillary benefit of recording those lectures and those classes so that students can go and review the notes and watch it later. And so we already had that capability in place. We were building out those facilities, and those are things that we've then built upon and accelerated as we've had to deal with the COVID pandemic.
I assume that the entire university actually switched to virtual learning during the COVID era, especially even now. Um, what were some of the key elements you actually thought about when you think about the technology which is actually needed, whether you want to do simulcast, whether you want to do, on lecture, online sharing? What role does technology actually play over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And so we had to make the shift, within basically 2 weeks back in the spring. We had to be very pragmatic of what we could accomplish. And so, we really focused on what we call remote learning. It's not true online learning in terms of the pedagogy and what we could accomplish. And so, there, what we really focused on is how do we deliver, the best experience, as fast as possible to the students. And so we made some very conscious decisions based upon the technology and making sure that the technology works. And so probably the first really conscious decision was for the spring that we were going to only do asynchronous learning, very limited synchronous learning, because we were wanted to ensure that students have access, that there was no issues getting online. And so we really focused on putting the faculty through boot camps of how to go record their classes, how to go use the asynchronous tools to have discussion groups, to go use our conference calling capabilities and Webex and features like that, so that they can do small synchronous discussions, as well as their office hours, but really limit it to mostly asynchronous to ensure, again, accessibility. And that worked out, very well for the spring. But as we go into the summer and fall, we are building a much more robust capability.
When you say in summer and fall, you're going to build much more of a robust capability. Yeah. Talk to us about that. What are you guys actually building?
Yeah, so prior to COVID, we were already on a journey where we, as a university, fundamentally believe that the future of the undergraduate experience, especially, is going to be multimodal. And what we mean by that is, in the future, there's really not a delineation between traditional face-to-face, hybrid, online. They all come together to deliver an experience that, depending on what is best for the student, they will learn, across all those different modalities. So they may have some classes that are primarily face-to-face. They may have some that are primarily online. We'll have some that are blended, depending on what's best for them at any given point in time, and what's best for the learning outcomes. And so we are already starting to put together a process to effectively create digital learning content for all of our undergraduate classes. And that was, a 5+ year journey when we really started that really in earnest about 6 or 9 months ago. And we discussed that the ancillary benefit would be, this would be great for disaster recovery, business continuity. And lo and behold, we didn't know that we needed it much faster. And so really what this has done, this recent outbreak, is accelerated those efforts. And really, from a positive standpoint, really catalyzed the university to come together to go do this. And so one of the fundamental activities to go and create that core digital learning content, because then you can flex on how you deliver it. It can be delivered face-to-face, it can be delivered pure online, it can be done in a blended fashion, is creating what we call master online courses, where we have faculty across the campus in a given discipline and course come together. We are in a unique position that we have both a open access 2-year college, a community college called Perimeter College as part of our university, as well as 4-year campus. We're actually developing these master courses across the 2-year and the 4-year faculty, which is really unique and somewhat innovative. And so created those master courses, and again, we're accelerating that. And so right now, we're in the process of developing about 24 master courses for the fall. And just to give some perspective, we, a little over a year ago, developed just a teaching or mastering teaching online course for our faculty. And a year ago when we launched it, we had maybe about 25 faculty or so that would sign up for a class. When we launched it in late spring, after the semester ended, we had over 900 faculty sign up for the first session of it. And we have about 1,500 that will be have gone through that of how to master online teaching. And then, like I said, about 24 courses that will launch this fall that will be master online course, master courses. And then by the spring, we'll add to where basically about half of our volume of undergraduate classes will be in a master course environment. So that will really help us, again, have the ability to be flexible. It'll be flexible for our students as well as flexible for the campus, depending on what happens, that we can flex, purely online, flex in a blended fashion, and so on. So that's really, where our efforts are focused right now.
And when you think about, the underlying technology, which basically enables this kind of synchronous, asynchronous learning, online face-to-face education, what are some of the key underlying fundamentals which you actually focus on? Security, for example, cannot be an after, right? So give us a little bit of more color on that.
Right. So, it's just like a house, right? There's a foundation. The foundation's built upon, a very robust network with a fast pipe. We upgraded about a year and a half ago to 100 gig from Internet 2 in the middle, again, which is being accelerated, of an entire network redesign and refresh. So you have to have that at the core, regardless of if the students are on campus or off campus. Our network is critical to support those efforts. And then sort of right there, on the foundation, you mentioned is security, right? And we all know security is utmost importance. Read the paper this morning, FBI is issuing an alert how hackers are targeting major corporations as more and more people work from home. It's not surprising. And so security has been important. We've had to go and ramp up our security efforts. And right away, one of the first things was resizing our VPN because that was more, obviously critical to have be able to have VPN connections for staff and faculty to access key resources in a secure fashion from home. And what we had previously was not nearly enough connections. We had to go from 1,000 connections to 5,000 connections and do it within literally 2 weeks. And we had Herculean efforts from our vendors as well as from our team. One of our network architects actually configured the VPN appliances at his home. Don't ask me what kind of home network he has. Had it configured over the weekend at home so that they could set up as soon as possible on Monday morning. And I joked that prior to COVID, I don't think our deans could spell VPN, but that was the number one question I had within the first week is, do we have enough VPN connections? Now, we are fortunate that, like I said, we've been building towards this multimodality. We knew some of the things that were going to be important in terms of investments over the last couple of years. And so as we made those investments, we really were going and making investments that supported more and more remote work and remote learning, even though that wasn't our primary mechanism. So as an example, about 2 years ago when we upgraded our phone system, one of the important things for me was to make sure that we had Jabber and remote telephony in addition to our traditional telephony systems. We didn't have anyone asking for that feature set, but of course, as we went and had our staff go work remotely, all of a sudden having that capability was very, very important, right? And so we had made that decision already implemented that. In addition, we had already made investments in video conferencing, right? And integrated those tools into the LMS. We're already using those within the campus, not necessarily for work from home, but because we have about 6 different locations around Atlanta with our perimeter college, our downtown campus, our business school has a location in Buckhead. We were spread out as a staff, and we were using tools like Webex, Microsoft Teams already to conduct meetings where just people couldn't be in place. Even our faculty senate was using those tools to conduct their meetings because it couldn't get all to the same place. And so we already were somewhat trained. Again, we pushed the limits as everyone did within those first 2 weeks, but having that in place was really important. And then, as I mentioned, the final piece is then really going and expanding the learning content and digitizing that, which again, we've been doing. We've done a bunch of work with adaptive learning, with digital literacy, but expanding that. And then the final piece, which we went and did a lot of work on, and thankfully was actually not the issue that we expected, was making sure that our students had access. So they had devices, that they had connectivity. And so we went and made sure that we had and purchased hotspots and devices for students. And we're fortunate that our students didn't need them as much as we expected. And when we did a survey at the end of the semester, our students came back and actually technology was not an issue even in the survey. So we saw that in terms of the uptick in the devices that we provided, but also the student survey. So that was a nice surprise.
So one last question. What would be any kind of last parting words you would have for the other IT leaders who are in the audience today?
Yeah, I think it's probably not new advice, because I've heard this advice and people have been talking about this for a long time, but again, it just becomes more important. Clearly, the role of technology and the role of technology leaders, as CIOs we all are, has become extremely important within higher ed as well as organizations across the world, given what we're going through. And so that importance, that is a responsibility, and the responsibility to really lead and don't wait for the organization to ask for what they don't know they need, right? It's really up to us and our responsibility to highlight and drive those technologies and those capabilities. We need them before we need them, right? And we were fortunate, right, that we were able to go do that, as I mentioned, with things like implementing Jabber when no one was asking about it, really going and rapidly responding to the need for VPN when, again, it was not a critical issue a couple months ago, investing in simulcast classrooms before we needed this. Again, I wish that we were faster in creating these master online courses and sort of master digital content. As I mentioned, we were already on that path. And one of my first discussions with our president and cabinet back in January was going to be how great this is going to be our business continuity plan in a couple of years when it's done. We wish we were further along, but we knew what we needed to go do. Those plans were already in place. We had already made those fundamental, like I said, foundational investments in the hardware as well as the key software enterprise applications to support this. And so it's really continuing that to go and lead and say, okay, what other capabilities can we go build to augment the goals of the university to deliver instruction, again, in this multimodal fashion. And I think we are now forever going to have more and more staff capabilities are going to be work from home, right? That's not going away. And so supporting that as well. And so that's not new advice, but it just becomes more and more important.
Thank you, Phil. That was fantastic. Really appreciate your time joining us today.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for joining us. Lance Ford here. I'm having a great time interviewing amazing folks, and I'm getting to talk right this second to David Gibson. David's title is a little long, so I'm going to make sure I get it. He's the UNESCO Chair of Data Science in Higher Education, Learning and Teaching at Curtin University. And Curtin University is in Australia. I got to be honest with you guys, they're so far ahead of us here in the States that it's already tomorrow there. David, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure. I've always joked that when people ask me where I work, I say I work in the future. And so now I actually do.
You absolutely do, my friend. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your role there at the university.
Okay, well, I come from the United States. I've been here since 2013. I came to be the Director of Learning Engagement, and then started focusing on the future of the university and learning futures in general, and became the UNESCO chair in 2016. The role of the chair is to find best practices throughout the world and share them with north to south, east to west, so that all the practices that people are aware of can borrow and great ideas from each other, and that we get the leading edge moving forward as rapidly as possible. And the heart of this change, which is critical to what we're going to talk about today, is that Data science is kind of the new entrant into all the sciences. And if you think about the fact that in, for example, biology a few years ago, there wasn't a field called computational biology. There's computational archaeology and computational humanities. So why is this word computation sitting in front of so much stuff today? And it's because of the role of artificial intelligence and the networked intelligence of the world that brings it all together. So the focus of this chair is to understand that change in the practices of science and what it is we know how to do, and how machines are now a full partner with us in making better human decisions because we have more data, faster data, better ways to view and see the insights that are in the data. So in all these different ways, we're promoting the idea that we need to understand that science has changed. And in place of what we used to do, which was to build theory and test theory with hypotheses, we now have to add that we also can model in great detail how we think things work. So the things that we're testing, instead of being a statement, can actually be a very highly detailed mechanical process. So this is giving us new insights into how things work and why things cause other things to happen.
Well, and David, I mean, you've been there since 2013. So I know when we talk about where you all are today versus where other institutions may be today, you're probably leading, maybe even bleeding edge of the curve. But what I want you to talk to me about real quickly is, how has this data that you all have been mining, these AI integrations into things, how has that changed what's going on there at Curtin? Can you give us some specific examples of how it's impacting teaching and learning?
One that comes to mind almost immediately is that instead of very large lecture halls where people are sitting in rows and typing notes while one person is at the front of the room talking, we've gotten rid of a whole lot of those hallways now. And now we have collaborative learning spaces, small tables with a lot of technology and instructors who can be anywhere and they want in the room, lots of screens and technology around, and the ability for teams to work and share. So it's a lot more of a focus on collaborative learning than a few years ago. We also have campuses in 4 other countries. So Curtin is a large university in the Asia Pacific region. We have over 60,000 students. We have 5 campuses in Western Australia, and we have 4 other campuses in 4 other countries: Dubai, Mauritius, Malaysia, and Singapore. Bringing this all together requires a technology for collaboration and a technology that helps us share practices even among these different cultures and times and places. So how do we operate now in a globalized environment where the research team might not ever meet each other face to face? So these are considerations that this university has had on its mind for quite a while. Changing the nature of teaching and learning from one-shot and expert teaching to peer-based collaborative problem solving. That's one major change. And then bringing together diverse communities from across space and time and letting them work together in these collaborative spaces. Those are 2 things I would point to that have been driving the changes at Curtin University for quite a while.
And I think this is amazing because you realize that in this, what is overused new normal of distributed learning and distance learning and remote learning, so many people are being thrust into this process that have never been here before, and you guys are doing it already. Can you tell me a little bit about how the recent events, the global health events, have impacted it positively or negatively, or maybe played alongside your current plan? How has that impacted what you all have been doing?
You might be familiar with the idea that when a change comes along, there'll be a few people that jump on very, very quickly. And then there's a second wave of folks who catch on, and then there's the vast majority in the middle, and then there's usually a couple of other bumps that are behind the vast majority. I'd say the big effect in our institution has been that no one is not on board now. So huge change in the sense that there's a realization that the work itself cannot even move forward unless you are on board and know how to use these tools and know how to teach in these methodologies. So it could very well be that someone who taught nothing but face-to-face a few months ago now has zero face-to-face opportunities. So this is a different kind of driver. Now, luckily, we were very prepared. So we had one of the largest catalogs of all online opportunities. Part of that was the history. The university has grown up in a state that is a gigantic piece of land with people spread all over it. So we've had a concept of distance education playing an important role, but now it's the only game in town. And so we're slowly getting back to a campus that people can come visit again, but that's going to be moving slowly, and it will not be the thrust of most of the university's work goes forward through these collaborative tools and the research networks that we've established. A couple of things that have helped the university is that there was a faculty learning engagement team. We called them FLET teams, faculty learning engagement teams, in each of the major faculties of the university. And these people were there specifically to help that transition. And they've been in place for, since 2013 or 2014. So they've had a few years to really get to their work. And almost every course in the campus was already operating with an online component. But what this has accelerated is that a lot of the student experience is now online. So rather than the online only being a repository of your readings, it's now also the place where collaborative teams are formed, where ongoing mentoring happens, and where the lectures and things that you're going to acquire are smaller chunks that you can go get anytime you want. So there's a lot less driving force from a lecturer who you don't know what they're going to say until your class time goes. That's not as common now. The class is a planned set of things for you to acquire, do, work on, and work with others. So it's that's more the nature of teaching these days.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because I'm going to take this in two veins. I know a lot of people are listening to what you're saying and thinking, man, this is where education should be. So there are two prongs to the question. We're going to take them one at a time. The first is, can you, without diving into the techie weeds, give folks a sense of some of the technologies? I know, based on reading and researching you guys, some you've even developed yourself, some of the technologies that you're using to bring this experience to life.
Yeah, I think a couple of the watchwords that have been guiding us, one of them is personalization. Now, in order to personalize, but to do it for 60,000 people, you have to have some technology enhancements. So a couple of things that are happening structurally for this is that we've, in a sense, begun to tear apart the degree, and instead are looking at the parts that you're going to learn as micro-credentialed components of a degree experience. And so micro-credentialing and personalization are fitting together in new ways. We're fairly advanced now on the administrative side by having the readiness and the capacity, and soon to follow will be the opening of the channels. So in the very near future, it will not be unusual at all for you to come to the portal of the university and put forward your experiences, your interests, your desires, and then to have some choices. Well, you could go this way, that way, or that way, and you could fit it together with these kinds of experiences, with these choices. And here are many different paths that you could take. So I think it's what we're trying to do is make it more obvious that there are many doorways of opportunity for every individual, and that your background at any point in time is a launching pad for you to make new decisions now. How do we empower those decisions and bring to your doorstep a full range of options so that you're making good decisions? And this happens at every stage of life. As soon as you enter the university, even before, we're working with school school populations now to increase the choice opportunities that young people have in thinking about their future, so they don't just come in the door thinking they're going to be an X or a Y. They're a person who has many capabilities, and we're going to advance as many of them as we can to keep their options open at every step. So a couple of the technologies, you mentioned some technologies, we have integrated with Cisco Teams. Teams is a great app, allows us to have small teams who have a focus to stick together, work together, create resources, come back to their space. It's a little bit like having a flexible building that you can build at a moment's notice and have people have private spaces. We've integrated that into a problem-solving platform that we call Challenge. It's challenge-based learning is when you have, rather than have a curriculum that you're going to teach, you put a challenge in front of teams of people and you say, we need to solve a problem here, who's interested? And you bring people to the doorway of learning by having them share an interest in solving a problem. So this application brings people to that doorway, organizes them into teams, and then gives them scaffolded instant solutions and things that they might not have encountered that could help them do their work. And one of the tool sets is the Cisco telecommunications tool set. So our side of the work is planning the scaffolding and setting up the challenge and rewarding the achievement. And the Cisco side is, with all of its tools, are about putting people together effectively for communication, file sharing, and real-time work. And these two things work together in a very nice way. Our end of the application, for example, automatically tracks the learning outcome linkages to activities that you do. So if a teacher, as a teacher, I have planned for you to dial a friend and find something out and send us back a quick half a page report on what you think we should do. There are a lot of skills involved in that little prompt. Did you find the friend? Did you find the resource you needed? Were you able to summarize it effectively? Did you come back and make a recommendation to the rest of the team? Every one of these sub parts are giving you an opportunity to show us what you know and can do. And so the tracking side of that is, well, when we see that you can do that task in a partnership or in a team and bring something valuable back to the team, we're making little notes of all the evidence that you have accumulated. So our side of the application in this case is an evidence machine looking to the stage when you would then want to reflect back and say, well, what did I learn here? I did this, I did that, and here's evidence of this and that. It's stacking up that evidence as you go. Our hope is that global workers of the future will work this way. They work already globally distributed, like you and I are halfway around the world right now. So how it is that we can move forward together, getting productive progress for our company or our country or just ourselves. This is going to enable us to think globally in a new way, and for us to know that in the background of these kind of activities, we are acquiring knowledge and using it effectively with other people.
Well, what's amazing about what you've said to me is we started down a path of individualized experiences, micro-credentialed, as it were, pick your own poison, to use my granddad's phrase, through your degree process. And then the process of actually experiencing those micro-credentials, those classes, is highly individualized through the platform that you all have developed. And it sounds to me like the assessment is individualized. To me, that's really where every school has got to be headed. We've got to stop the cookie cutter modalities of educational delivery. And you have found some tools inside Cisco and some things you've developed to work together to actually make that happen. That is absolutely amazing. Now, do you have lessons? I guess the last question I have for you is, do you have lessons that you would expound to other institutions who may be looking to go down this road?
That's a really great question. So I think the commitment to using technology to enhance an individual decision making It used to be a fairly scary thing for educators to imagine letting learners learn what they want to learn. A lot of teachers approach their classroom as though I know what I need you to learn, and I'm going to force you to pay attention until I can test you to see whether you did get it or not. I think that we're changing the nature of that conversation to one where I'm confident that if you tackle a hard problem, I'm going to be able to observe you acquiring knowledge and using it in some new ways. And I used to not have the faith that I alone could do all the observations needed. This is where the help of the AI and the machines and the technologies help do some of that record keeping. So I can be more confident that my wisdom as a teacher is going to enable you during your process to make good decisions and get my advice. Now I truly am the guide on the side. The problem itself is the goal. We will gamify the path to the goals. And in the process of people tackling those, they will encounter all of the important things we want them to learn. And by important, I mean, if we ignore what was on the quiz that we're planning for the quiz on Friday, and we ask the Mark Twain question of that an education is what you have left over after you've forgotten everything they taught you in school. So what is the heart of the education that you're going to get out of multiples of this kind of engagement? You're going to get leadership, creativity, collaboration, problem solving, global awareness. These are the kinds of and personal development. These are the skills that all workplaces need in their people, and being able to work with others and solve problems creatively, and to bring themselves into their work so that they're motivated to engage the world with their team members. So these are the kinds of things that we think are the important long-term gains, and that our working with these technologies is enabling wise teaching to take place more effectively these days.
Well, it sounds to me like you're encouraging folks to really, I hate to use the phraseology, stay the course, but all the things that we know, truly know to be best teaching practices, which in the past might have seemed unattainable because of the differences of the students, are really there now. And you all are proving that at Curtin University. It's no longer a matter of, just enduring the content. It's a matter of engaging with the content.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, that's a wonderful summary. I think that's honoring the fact that learning is a very natural reaction. We all grow up from the earliest days when we're taking our first breath. Learning is a natural process. Almost all the other schooling aspects start to get in the way of that process. Our goal is to get those things out of the way and come back to first principles, that inquiry itself is a highly engaging, motivating force in our lives. And we all want to be better. We all want to help others. If we can really take those two pillars and help each person be a better person and help others, then we're going to have a much better world to live in.
Man, David, I could not have said it better. And I want to thank you for taking time from your schedule to join us. And I want to thank those of you who've been watching this part of our live experience for being with us. I can talk to David all day, because the way that he thinks about education is so refreshing compared to where so many educators are. And you may find yourself at a point right now as you're watching this where you think, man, I'd like to know some more about this. We're going to provide you some links to the amazing things that are going on at Curtin University. David, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
And thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to join us today. I'm so excited to have Jay Shirley from Oak Meadow School join me for a quick conversation today about what he's seeing. Jay, how are you, my friend?
Very good, Lance. Thank you so much for letting me join you. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. Well, tell me a little bit about who you are, maybe a little bit about your background, and what's going on there at the school as far as what do you guys do? What kind of school is it?
Right. I am the head of school at Oak Meadow School. We're a school that starts with toddlers and goes all the way through 8th grade. I've spent most of my entire career in education, some of which has been as being a head of school. And what's unique about Oak Meadow School is we are also a Montessori school. This is my first Montessori school, so I'm learning a lot about Montessori as well. But there's just some wonderful application to thinking about online learning and blended learning through the lens of Montessori as well, which is something that we've been working on here.
I think that is an amazing topic because I don't think too many people really take a moment and think about when you say toddlers, you're talking about 2-year-olds, you're talking about younger than 2?
Yeah, 18 months.
Okay, so we're talking about 18-month-old students that you are. Tell me what they typically might do in a classroom there at Oak Meadow. What would an 18-month-old? I mean, we have 4-year-olds here at our school,
right.
But I don't really have any 18-month-olds.
Right. They are amazing in terms of, I think even parents are surprised at what 18-month-olds can do. And we have our toddler classroom goes from 18 months up to 3 years. And then we have an early childhood program, which we call Children's House, that goes from 3 through 6. And then we go into the elementary years and middle school years. But our students are even at this youngest level, the toddlers. There are activities that they have that are really designed for their age that they can engage with. And these are activities that can be physically manipulated that help them to begin to learn about language, about or the way things are organized and order. They begin to develop both a mathematical sense as well as develop their, children who are really young have this amazing brain power in terms of language. I wish we could all as adults keep that power throughout our lives, but their brains are wired to just absorb everything around them, and they do. So we create experiences where they are really developing cognitively as well as the social interaction with other students. So amazing amount happening. I think Maria Montessori knew before most educators did that those early years before formal schooling, actually some of the most brain development happens. And so to take great care of what students are experiencing and what they're learning in those ages is really important.
Yeah, I mean, those formative years are so important from a teacher's perspective, right? Who's dealing with the students who are coming to me, age 5 and up. What they bring with them is 90% of how fast we can push them forward.
That's right. Absolutely.
So we're dealing in a time now where we have distributed learners, or we have learners who have to be joining us asynchronously. Talk to me just a little bit before we dive into that about what kinds of technologies were being used in those classrooms, if any, prior to the distributed learning that we now find ourselves. What was going on with technology?
Right. So I would say very little was happening even across our entire school. There was no technology in our early childhood or toddlers program. If there was, it would be very minimal. It'd be something the teacher might have and might introduce something, but there was nothing that was really designed for the students. And I think that there probably was some intentionality around feeling that the physical experience of students was so important at that age that I think that there was intentionality not to have them sitting and looking at screens. In lower elementary, that begins to shift. I think that we have small devices. We have Chromebooks as what we use in the school, and so that begins to be the first experience when students begin to explore a variety of subjects, and Chromebooks may be one way that they have done that. As you then move to upper elementary and middle school, technology becomes a much bigger part of the student's experience. And in upper elementary, every student has a Chromebook, and in middle school. And so these are devices, the research side of this, using the devices for writing, for presentations, that becomes a much more natural part of what happens in the upper elementary and middle school. But I think for the students that were younger, the shift to the forced shift where everyone had to move online, that was a huge change for the children in our lower elementary program and younger. The upper elementary students, which we consider the fourth graders and above, they really were much more ready to be able to kind of make that adjustment. Our middle school students, it was very easy.
So let's parse through this a little bit, because I'm always the guy who likes to kind of pick at the challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to throw out the 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. I'm not trying to dismiss that. But talk to me first and foremost a little bit about where the teachers were and now where the teachers are in some of those younger and most young environments. What are they doing to continue to engage those learners? And I've got to be honest with you, it's probably leaning a lot on the parents in those homes too. What kind of response have you got from parents? Tell me a little bit about what's going on there.
Right. So I think an important part of understanding Montessori philosophy is that the experience of our students is one where there are activities that the students have. There are essentially like manipulatives that many people may know, materials that they use that help the students unpack things from geography and science all the way through their language use and math. They're really wonderful materials that connect what's happening in the brain through the fingers, because I think in the hands, especially at those young ages, kids learn so much through what they touch. And so there's a real connection in that. And I think the other part is that there's a big focus for our teachers. It's not just on content delivery. It's about creating a learning experience for the students where the teacher is in the role of observer. The teacher is thinking about where is this student in their language development? Where is this student in their understanding of mathematical sense? And what is it that I think is going to help challenge this child to the next place of their level? How do you keep, one of the goals of all educators is how do you keep that child at that place of development where they're being challenged in a way that they're really having to grow and learn something that's a little bit uncomfortable, and they don't completely know the answer, but it's not so far out ahead of them that it becomes confusing and disorienting. So that's where the teachers try to keep the students. And so the classroom is set up in a way where the teachers spend a lot of time observing and having the students work with different materials, observing where they are, thinking about using the child as a guide to figure out what is the child interested in, where is the child, where is their ability, what might they be interested in. And so the teachers are always sort of opening doors to let a child try something to see if that is the kind of thing that stimulates them growing to this next level. So it is very engaged. It's completely around engagement. It's not about, I've got the content, here's the content, I'm going to deliver it to you so you can memorize this. It's about, all learning is about engaging with these ideas and with this knowledge and with these concepts and having them be experienced by the child where it makes sense and it's connecting with their brain and they become interested and then want to pursue something. A lot of what our teaching is about inspiring a child to open a door to something that the teacher sees they might be interested in, might take that child as this amazing place of learning and growth. So for our teachers, especially through those lower elementary years, everything was really very physical and in the classroom. And when we knew we had to close the school, when all schools had to close, I think that the immediate response from our teachers is, this just won't work. What we do doesn't translate into something that involves looking at the screen. But I think that probably what made the most sense to our teachers is because in addition to the fact that we're not just about content delivery, we're about relationship building. And it is the relationship between the teacher and the student on a cognitive level, but also the teacher being aware of where the students are on a social and emotional level as well, that that is at the very heart of what's happening in those classrooms. And the teachers realize, if I can't be with the children, if I can't be with the class, and if I can't actually be one-on-one with students or in small groups with students, interacting with them and observing them and working with them in a way that's appropriate to their development, that they're not going to learn. So we are going to have to figure out, how would we use technology to make that really personal, relational connection. And so our teachers, who I think initially thought there's no way we could do an online meeting, Jay, that's just impossible. Don't ask me. There's no way I could learn how to do this. I don't know how to do this. I can't see, I can sort of see the value of keeping in touch, but I won't be able to do this. Literally within about 3 days, the teachers, because I think that the Webex, the Cisco systems are so easy, Webex meetings ended up being something that was so intuitive and so easy that the teachers sort of found themselves after a week having meetings with their students. So we have a circle meeting or an all class meeting, even with the youngest children. Even the toddlers have a morning meeting. And so the teachers found they could still have their morning meeting. They could still have that circle with the students. And the students who, even after just the first week at home, were already missing their peers, that was the amazing thing. Here they were. They were still there. And yes, they were on a screen, but they were their real friends. And they said, "Oh, look, there's so and so, and there's so and so there was this incredible connection that happened from student to student and with teacher and student that was so powerful. And within a week, the teachers were sold that this was working. They saw the value of what this was enabling them to do. And I think, again, this was all new, so we had a lot to learn. But what I would say is the teachers progressed very quickly from being able to be successful in having a group meeting or a circle meeting with the whole class, to working with a smaller group of students around a particular activity that might be aimed at their developmental level, whether that was in math or science or in language, or even one-on-one with a student that was ready to be challenged on something uniquely for that child, and where the teacher needed that one-on-one to kind of see where the child was. And the other part that was amazing is, because this was happening at home and it did involve the parents having to be more involved, it also meant that the teachers had to be more connected with the parents. There was a positive part of this, is the relationship was actually strengthened between teachers and parents because they were collaborating more. The parents got to watch what was happening in the classrooms in a way that they had never been able to see. They got to watch the teachers and the way the teachers worked with the students. And they then had this opportunity. So the teachers made office hours once a week to make sure that not only did they have that time to connect with the students individually, but they had time to connect with the parents individually to find out how things were going, so they could adjust. Because a lot of this was about being flexible. Parents, some of whom had full-time jobs and still were having to work hard, others that had some flexibility and could help more. The teachers had to figure out, how do you adapt and be flexible and work with the different families in ways that are going to support that child growing and developing. So, and again, I'd say in our older grades, 4th grade and above, and the middle school students, because they are very independent and could use these technologies without a lot of parent support, they were able to, and we use Google Classroom as a sort of our learning management system, essentially, for the upper grades. The students were able to understand their assignments and to work on things and be more connected. But even for the older kids, it was the social part too that was so important. And this is what the WebEx meetings made possible, is not just for the teacher to be connected with the students, but the students to even be able to have social time together and not just everything being academic. And a lot of what we do is hands-on. So again, our focus is not having the kids sit in front of a computer screen for 60 minutes and just have content fed to them. there will be an activity. There's something that they're doing, and the teacher might explain something. And maybe the students then have to go and do something on their own, or they may go do something in a small group and then come back and report about what they learned. But our goal is to really have a thoughtful integration of synchronous and asynchronous learning happening all the time, so that it's not just sitting and looking at a screen. And I think that was very engaging for the students. So that, I said a lot there, but that gives us a snapshot of the whole program.
I think you're exactly where I wanted to go with this. And first and foremost, it's about the relationship, right? And so many people poo-poo or discount video because they think, well, it's just not that big of a deal. I can still get my message out. This is not a matter of getting a message out. This is a matter of foundationally forming a relationship. And huge kudos to your faculty members for going from this can't be done to I'm having individual meetings with students, their parents, within a week. I mean, that is unbelievable. What do you attribute that to? I mean, were you kind of modeling this, or do you just have that great a faculty? Is this replicable, I guess is my question, Jay? Because that's the question I always get.
Well, I do think we have some very good tech people at the school, and I think that helps. So there were people who could jump into Webex early on and learn how to work with it and be in a position to work with teams of teachers. So we have 2 tech faculty members who are able to meet in small groups, sort of by grade level or what we call program level, to work with those teachers and to explain how things work. And also we made some videos to help show them some simple things for them to do. But we also had the tech team gave them advice around what may go wrong is this or this, and this is what you do. So for instance, you may find that a student isn't connecting, or their microphone's not working, and you don't know why. So they came up with, here's some troubleshooting you might be able to do. You might not be able to solve the problem then, and we can jump in later and maybe work with the family, but there are some troubleshooting. So our tech team helped them walk through the experience. The teachers got to practice with themselves first. And that makes a big difference. So I think having a couple people who have technical knowledge and are just very good in the technical realm, but also good working with teachers, I do think that is important. And as we head into the next phase of this, which is a much more complicated phase when we're talking about, I would define blended learning in a way that there's lots of ways to define it, but for us, we're going to be delivering learning in the classroom for the students that are still here and learning at home together. And it's not separate, because we are a small enough school that the community that we're building of the learners at home are part of the community of learners that are learning at school. And for us, it doesn't make sense to put those in separate buckets and they operate in separate universes. For us, it's about figuring out how do you build that sense of community, and for the kids at school to value those kids at home and see, they know what they went through, because all the kids at school, they used to be at home. So they should have empathy for the experience of being at home. But we're going to be trying to think about how do you provide technology, again, through some Cisco systems that we haven't explored before, where the experience of the classroom comes through to the learner at home, and it's not just the teacher. What we had was the teacher staring at their laptop and all the students on their Chromebook, looking at each other. And now we're trying to actually replicate the environment of the school and bring that into the home in a different way with the learner. So a whole different challenge.
Wow. Well, thank you for telling me where you were prior. Thank you for telling me where you were under emergency circumstances in spring.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of planning and training has gone in preparation for where you will be in this fall. Do you have anything to add to our conversation today, my friend, that maybe I didn't ask you, that you're thinking, golly, you never asked me about this, and this is something that's just really important? And if you don't, that's fine too.
I do have to acknowledge that for teachers, I think that this is hard for it's hard for anyone when you're used to doing thing in a certain way, in a way of approaching the work you do, and then you have to shift out of that into a completely different mode. it's challenging. And I would say that no teacher went into this just thinking this was going to be easy. I think that they were surprised in that first round how easy it was to work with WebEx meetings in a way they didn't think would be as easy. I think that as we head into this next round, we are working at some training right now. We're getting some equipment in. We have a long way to go, even though school's going to open in 2 weeks. Fortunately, we've got 2 weeks to spend a little bit more time. We've added to our tech staff because we felt like we needed to have someone else who really understood how to operate a WebEx board and how to work in WebEx teams and try to figure out how these systems might work. Because for our teachers right now, for them to be able to think about their curriculum and how they're going to be providing this for students at home and at school, and also preparing our students to come into an environment that's going to be very different with masks and physical distancing, it would be overwhelming now for teachers to have to take this all on. So again, I think we needed to invest a little bit on the staff, the training side of this, to have people that will be there to really to support the teachers, to problem solve with them. And that's our approach, is really of what is the experience you want your student to get? What are your goals as a teacher in terms of what you're hoping will be possible in the student's learning? And what are the obstacles and problems that are going to get in the way of us doing this? And how might we look at technology as a tool that might help us solve some of these problems and be able to get to some solutions that could work? That's kind of how we're approaching it.
That's awesome. And I'm smiling because you've come full circle describing how your 18-month-old learns, and it sounds very similar to how you're going to work with your teachers. Yeah. I'm not belittling that, but I'm saying how powerful it is to have a hands-on approach with a guide on the side, helping them as they go through it, just like you do with that 18-month-old, that 24-month-old. Here's things you're interested in. Let's see if we can get our hands on this and get manipulative. And man, that's just what an awesome approach to have with teachers. And for those of you who are watching this as faculty members, lessons to be learned in this whole area. This last one is a huge one to take away. If you're an administrator and you're looking at these opportunities, listen to what Jay is saying, because obviously that is driving success inside his organization, to really meet those teachers where they are and get hands-on with them and come alongside. Jay, this has been the fastest 25, 30 minutes, however long it's been, that I've spent in a long time, and it's all because of you and your amazing attitude. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lance, for having me.
And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach directly out to us. This is an awesome opportunity for you to learn and for me to learn too. So thanks for joining. Hello, everyone. Dr. Lance Ford here with you. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to watch this interview. I'm really, really excited. Now, before we get started, I want you to know that I am in my office at the school, and we started last week with students. So right now it's the afternoon. You may hear some voices. Those are not the ones in my head. Those are actually students outside on recess. So sorry about any interruptions, but I'm joined today by Devinder Katharia, who is the product manager for WebEx meetings, focusing specifically on education. And also, I'm joined by Chris Botker. He is he's in charge of WebEx, the rooms experience strategy. So we're going to look at our conversation from a couple of different perspectives. But Chris, I'd really like to start with you, because I know that you actually have a child that attends school. And so what we're talking about today is really near and dear to your heart. You've done a lot of research to try to figure out what's going on in those classrooms at your school and how we can help teachers. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found, my friend?
You bet. And thank you for having me, Lance. Pleasure to be here. And yes, you're right. I have a child who has a specific condition that means he wasn't able to attend school physically. But then when the schools closed down back in March, we obviously saw the opportunity there because knowing that all the kids were going to go home, as I said to the headmaster at the time, now you and the rest of the children are in the same position that Ryland's been in for the last 6 months, which is completely isolated from everybody else. So it has been fascinating because we got them up and running on Webex straight away the following day, as many schools will be in that same situation, which have gone from nothing, no online learning plan or anything, to then really just having to think, oh, what do we need to do? And what I came away with in helping them through that process was really there are 4 elements that a school looks at in terms of what they need to do from a high level perspective. They need to do classroom creation. And often they've already done this. They know how to do this, and often, every time they've already done this. They need to do classroom delivery. Easy. I've got all the kids physically in front of me. I know how to do that. I've done it for years and years and years. And I may tweak it every summer or whatever for the new upcoming year, but I know how to do those 2 things. Then you have classroom orchestration. And this is where many schools have learning management systems, LMS systems, and others of the like, which we'll talk about. And obviously the big one there for my school in particular was Google Classroom. And it helps orchestrate the classes themselves and the lessons, and people can check them in, check them out, and what have you. And then the 4th element was really around teacher professional development. And what was interesting is when you go in and you have a discussion, okay, well, now you need Webex to be able to help you to do this, for example. They said, oh, yeah, but we already have Google Classroom, or we already have an LMS system, not realizing those systems aren't built to deliver the classes, especially as we will talk about later on, especially when I'm now in this hybrid mode where I have some kids in the class and some kids at home, but I don't have enough teachers to dedicate to each pod. I have to teach them at the same time. So I think the key thing there was between those 4 things is like, I've done number 1 and I've done number 1, I've got number 3, and I'm doing number 4, but that 4 is going to change with the professional development. How do I deliver this? And I think that's what we're going to be discussing today in a little bit more depth as to how do you go about delivering that.
Well, and I think that's really important to transitioning this conversation to Devender, because when we talk about orchestrating it, you said on several occasions you threw out learning management system, LMS, you even identified several different ones. Devender, these are tools that many educators already have. I call that rock what you got. So if you're going to ask me to do something different as a teacher, you better start with where I am, allow me to rock what I've got, and build on that. What is Cisco doing from a Webex perspective to help teachers rock what they've got?
Sure. So when we talk about learning management system, so from Webex point of view, we already have delivered today Webex working with Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, Desire to Learn, Sakai. Now, but that's not it. What we are doing right now is we are delivering Webex integration with Schoology. And as we are all aware that Schoology is the leading LMS into K-12, and our educators in K-12 have been asking us, how soon they can get something with Schoology working with Webex. Now, that is just talking about the integrations. In addition to that, just looking at the core features, what we are delivering in this LMS, we have been continuously doing developments in those areas. As an example, we have recently launched a feature which allows educators to do a recording before the class start. So basically, the concept, what is very familiar in the terms are flip learning. So we are trying to do flip learning where the teachers can do a recording of the classes beforehand, and then leveraging Webex Teams, they could actually drop in the link to that recording, and so that students are already prepared. And when they come to the class, the teacher can actually do more of a discussions around that versus trying to do a teaching on the class itself. Now, where it becomes more invaluable is, as we all understand, with this whole hybrid learning environment, where teachers do not have that luxury where they could be in the front of all the students in the classroom. Now you have this situation where there are certain students who are physically in the classrooms, others are actually, joining the classes from their homes. This whole concept becomes a lot more intuitive and a lot more flexible for the teachers and the students alike. Now, I'm not stopping here. In addition to that, our customers, our educators have been asking a lot more features into our LMS. So there are a couple of more things I want to call out. One is the capability where now you can edit the recurring recordings. Until now, the problem has been that if I have scheduled a class which is recurring, I could not edit it. So that is something we have introducing now. The second big feature we are introducing is that our teachers have been asking that give us some of the controls at the admin level, whether I want to enable classroom collaboration or I want to enable office hours. So now we are providing those capabilities where an admin can configure which features will be available, which features will not be available to the educators.
Wow. So let me try to unpack just a little bit of this here for our folks who are watching. I'd really like to take just a moment and let you guys kind of see what the integration looks like. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through all the features that Devinder talked about. We'd love to show those to you, but let me take just a moment from a classroom perspective and share with you how this works for me personally, okay? When I was hired as a teacher, I was hired to work with students in at least 3 different ways. Number 1, large group, whole group class instruction. Inside this plugin, and we're in Schoology right now, okay? Inside this plugin, I have a tick box called virtual meetings. That is the virtual experience where all of us are coming together. Maybe I have, like Devinder said, a hybrid situation where some learners are physically here and other learners are remote, but it's a virtual experience for me. Then I was also hired to work with learners in small groups. Some of these learners are doing project-based learning. Devinder alluded to the flipped learning process. Some of these students are working together to develop digital portfolios. There's a lot of media going on, both to and from me as the instructor, and that requires that we kind of break it down a little bit for students so that each can contribute inside those small groups, okay? There is one other way that I was hired to work with learners, and that is individually. In a K-12 world, sometimes we have needs for speech pathologists, sometimes we have students on IEPs, and we need to be able to work with them one-on-one. The most common of these is a parent-teacher conference, where the parent and the teacher come together to really discuss the progress of that learner. In a COVID situation, we don't have parents who are all able to show up. So also, we have parents who work, right? And sometimes their schedules don't align. So we tick the appropriate boxes for the way we want to utilize this. And then to Devinder's point, we have the ability to schedule our classes. We have the ability to see recordings of our classes. We have the ability to check the roster and see who actually showed up for our classes. Again, this is virtual meetings, whole group instruction. We have our small groups where students can message each other, where students can file share with each other on those projects. And as a teacher, I have purview into all this. We're not asking them to go to some third-party website where I have no idea what they are or are not doing. All of this is secure inside our interface. And then I'm going to come back to Devinder on that security topic here in just a moment. And then last but not least, our individual moments. This is where the teacher, I get to decide these are going to be 30-minute windows of time. I choose the times I want to be available, and then I save those. Students at that point log in, they reserve the time, and both they and I receive a confirmation email with the appropriate links.
So Lance, that's good. Could you talk maybe a little bit about, so that's great when everything is online and everybody's remote, but what now happens when we start to introduce systems in the classroom, and how does that sort of interface and interact there? Do they have to go through all the hoops and jumps to get those things connected?
That's a great question. Let me go to Devinder on this, because I know that Devinder is just really excited to share with us a new product that's going to be released for schools that may not have a learning management system. Or Chris, you mentioned Google Classroom. What we've been talking about is LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability Compliant, okay? Google Classroom is not. Seesaw, another one that a lot of pre-K through about second grade students are using, also not. Devinder, what can we do to answer Chris's question about room scheduling and help those folks who don't already have an LMS?
Sure. So let's take a step back and try to understand when we have these teachers who are now looking at hybrid environment, what do they need? What are the challenges they have today? And talking about the challenges, the bigger thing what they have been telling us is, I need a very simple interface to schedule these classes. And when I do that, I want to make sure that all the classes are secured. And by the way, I, as an educator or teacher, should not be concerned about security. What I want to make sure is that I am simply scheduling a class the way when I'm in a traditional classroom, I just walk into the classroom and I know that no one is going to intrude my class. So the same kind of security I need when I'm trying to schedule these classes, whether they are hybrid or purely online. Okay. Now, in addition to that, when I do schedule those classes, I want to make sure is that the links to those classes are only accessible to the students who are in your classroom, not anyone else. And besides that, when I am done delivering those classes, I could simply able to share the recording links. Okay. While I'm doing all of this, Chris, one of the asks from my teacher is also that, hey, I have these Webex devices which are deployed in my classrooms, and I'm doing this hybrid learning. So when I schedule these classes from the interface, when I walk into the classroom, I have this big green button already there. I just press that and the class is started without me worrying about where is the link, which link I have to select, and how do I really pair my Webex devices. Nothing I have to worry about. That's what my teachers are asking about. What I'm learning from these teachers is they want technology to adapt to their needs, not the other way around. And this is where what Webex we are doing is we are bringing in this Webex for learning, which really allows you to do all of this without you as a teacher to learn anything new.
So can I ask another question on that side of things as well? Because one of the feedbacks that I've also gotten is, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, is what happens if I want to set up breakouts in my classes and I actually am in front of a system, or I'm at home teaching, and can we do that with those breakouts? And how easy is it then to go and check in and check out on those actual breakouts?
Absolutely. So the concept what I'm talking about, which is right as Lance alluded that this is a new product what we are bringing in. So essentially, what we do is we integrate with the Webex Teams, which is our flagship product for the classroom collaboration. What we do is we bring in those classroom collaboration into our Webex for Learning software or the platform. So with that, what you can do now is that as a teacher, by default, we create those team spaces with all the students. And when we do that, so you can now break out those student groups in multiple, maybe based on project based, right? You can say that, hey, I'm going to dip this whole classroom into the group of 5 students for the assignments. Now you could do that. Now within those spaces, students can have their own real-time collaboration. They can actually, do a meeting, or they can share the files. They can exchange messages. All of these they can do within those spaces. This all functionality will be available into the Webex for Learning software, and it will be available to all of our teachers, all of our students. And the good part, this will be available at no additional cost. So pretty much any of our existing Webex customers, when they will get access to Webex for Classrooms.
So as my students are working in those breakouts, I can then just jump from breakout to breakout. And if I have a device, I can just go in there and just click again a green button for each little breakout, and then actually see what's going on, help them, and then jump to my next breakout. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so let's take a second and kind of, again, unpack this from what does it look like for a teacher who's living in this world. My first hour class meets from 7:55 to 8:50 each and every morning. And we have been told that we will use Google Classroom as a part of our learning management system process. Here you see my Google Classroom for my music class. I'm going to choose my video chats because, again, I've got students who are ill. I've got students who need to join from different locations. We teach this in a very large, wide open space We do, to Devinder's point and Chris's point, have the Webex hardware. So when I come into my vocal music class, I have the ability to schedule the meeting for the entire semester. It's really straightforward. In order to get this here, I basically hit new meeting, gave it a name. I determined what date the class would start, how long it would last. And then I basically said that class happens every day of the week. Let me go back and pick Tuesday, right? And then I said it happens from now until the end of my semester, which for me, that is December the 18th. Okay. And I hit create. I'm not going to create another one right this second because my students will totally wig out, because this is actually our live class. When I hit create, there's the big green button. It hosts, it joins my class. My students also have a big green button, by the way, Chris. Theirs doesn't say host, theirs says join, because I'm sort of the, to Devinder's part, I'm the gatekeeper for my class.
But Lance, you just said earlier on, you actually specifically mentioned Google Classrooms as one of the things that does not have this LTI interface. Yet what you've shown here, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can create it within Google Classroom, and then it does pass it over to Webex. So even though it sounds to me when you say there's no LTI, but you've just scheduled something that will automatically appear in my students and on my system. Is that right?
That is correct. And that is the new announcement that Devender is coming with for us today. And that is the ability to do this with or without a learning management system. I'm dealing with a lot of rural schools across our nation and around the world where there is no agreed upon portal for students to log into as a learning management system. This, and Devender, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will stand alone as well, correct?
That is correct. So essentially, you know, when you think about our customer base, our educators, you know, we have a representation from all across the globe. We have schools that have already deployed learning management systems, but then there are so many schools who do not have any LMS at all. So when they need to really, you know, have single portal for their educators to schedule the classes, you know, to look for the recordings, to look for the attendance for the previous classes, they could simply log in. And the beauty here is you would log in from single sign-on. So we are not asking you to create a brand new login password. If you are SSO enabled, you pretty much use the same login password to log in. Now, one more thing which I want to highlight here is when Lance was showcasing how this is integrated, you saw that when he logged in or when he clicked on this link, the teacher already has the course, what they were teaching in their dashboard. Now, the way we are bringing in those courses is we can directly sync with your student information system. Now, we also understand that there are schools available, there are schools who do not have a student information system deployed. So we also give the flexibility that those schools can simply use a CSV file, a spreadsheet, where they have the students' information, the course information. They could simply upload that CSV, and we could fetch the information from the CSV. And that's how when a teacher logs in, they already know these are the courses I'm teaching. These are the students who are enrolled in those courses. And then they can simply walk through to create the new classes. In the future, what is not really in the product right now, in the future, they could also create the spaces. And Chris, to your another point which you brought up earlier, that what if I have the devices? So pretty much when you are scheduling the classes, if you have a devices deployed, you will have an option to pick and choose the device which you want to, where you want to conduct this meeting on. And that way, when I walk up to that device, the green button will be available there.
So Lance, let me ask another question then, because you had mentioned there, you know, your classes that you're running inside a Google Classroom, and sometimes people get confused because they say, well, can't I do all of this in Google Classroom? Are you actually, your scheduling and what have you, are you checking in and out of Google Classroom in essence the work? So the work still resides, is going back and forth, but are you actually doing, are you saying that you're doing the work inside of Webex, and then, but you're still attaching it in and out of Google Classroom? So I retain that as sort of the retainer for that? Is that fair?
Yes, because to your point, the classroom is already orchestrated inside Google Classroom. What we've got to do is figure out a way where we don't distance our remote learners, where, to your point and to vendors, the technology is the conduit for teaching and learning, not the topic of my teaching and learning. Guys, I'm teaching a music class. I don't have time to talk about technology. I've just got to have it get out of the way. I think the vendor said that as he had been interviewing teachers. It's got to get out of the way and let me teach my class. So Chris, I know you're ramrodding these experiences from a hardware perspective. Can you tell our folks, and maybe we can even show some of this, what are some of the benefits to actually being able to have hardware in the classroom?
Yeah, it's a good point. So it's a good question as well, and I think specifically relevant because of the situation that we're currently in, which is completely unique. So, you know, some schools may have had or have video conferencing systems. Pick any brand, any flavor, and what have you. They may have had them. When they've had them for one purpose typically, and one purpose only, which is I bring in a remote expert. And it can be a remote teacher, it could be a museum, it could be NASA, you name it. But I'm going to bring somebody or something in remotely to then show the class in front of me. That is fundamentally different to what we are faced with now, post-COVID, in the new hybrid classrooms. Because in that scenario, my students were typically always in the classroom in front of me. Now I have a challenge of, well, hang on a minute. I have some of the students here and some of the students at home. How do I ensure that they're engaged properly? And what I can't afford is to say, well, I can use the same video system that I had before and just put everything on there. No, because then your remote students are in the front of the class where they don't want to be. They want to be in the class. So you can't do that. So you really, really have to think about that. And I think that's, you know, maybe we can talk a little bit about what the setup you have there.
So, Chris, you're in my office, which has seating for about, I don't know, I could put 10 or 15 students in here. And I pulled these chairs forward so that you guys could see that students would physically be in the room with me. Now, the best way I know how to do this is actually come over here and just kind of draw it out for you, okay? So I'm standing at the front of the classroom, rocking what I've got, which is typically a Promethean board, smart board, or something like that. And then I have these students who are seated in my music classroom. Now they're 6 feet apart, socially distanced. And at the back, I have a screen. Yes.
I'm getting, so I'm the student here, clearly, because I'm at the far end. I'm getting the pointer web camera at a whiteboard experience. So I assume you're drawing, but I can't see, I'm only seeing white. I cannot see a single thing.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris. This is a teachable moment for those of you who are watching this experience, because that's exactly what happens when you set a webcam at the back of a classroom. You do not get to see the content. That's why it's so important, Chris, that we get the right hardware in these classrooms, so that as a teacher, I might from the front of my classroom say, okay, Webex, share my screen. And now you're not only going to see me, but you will simultaneously see the digital content that I'm displaying.
Got it.
That gives my learners the sense that they are physically here engaging with me, and we don't have second-class remote citizens, okay? So, as I was saying, I'm up front. I've got my Promethean board. I have my students who are apart from each other, 6 feet. And then I have my students like you, Chris, who are joining me from their home on this visual back here at the back, television, what have you, screen. The important thing to consider is that the camera that's built into this engagement gives you the sense that you're here, because as I maneuver around, that camera comes with me, right? So it's as if you're turning your head, and all of this is happening without me wearing any special devices, without me having to train anything. It's just a part of the classroom native. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, except can you just explain a little bit about how you've got, because this is not Promethean software that we're looking at. So yet you said you were using the Promethean board there. And so how is that connected, and how does that work? How do you get that into the call, for example?
So my laptop is positioned on my desk. okay? There's a couple of ways we could do this, Chris. Way number one is we could hardwire a cable, just like you might do in a classroom today, or because of the Cisco software that's running on the hardware, I can wirelessly share that image to the screen. I could also utilize the USB functionality, which is what I'm doing now, that gives my Promethean that touch control of my laptop. So it is literally just a source, a multimedia source as you have it today. The only difference is we have that signal also going to our remote learners.
So so what you're saying in essence is all that you've done is you've walked in, you've opened up, turned on the Promethean, you've then in essence controlled your laptop, you've opened up Webex, and you've said connect to this call. And then your laptop then recognizes the system that we're on the back and then says, well, I know that's going to be content here for everybody in front of the class, but I have to connect the video system. I see this video system at the back, and then it connects it automatically as well. Is that how that works?
That's it, because when you depress that green button, remember, when we talked to Devinder, we talked about scheduling our classes, and we received this green button. When we depress that green button, it then sees my devices as options for things that I can share with you. And you saw how I shared it. There was nothing physically for me to do, much like I would address Alexa or Siri or some other AI. I addressed, okay, Webex, stop sharing my screen. And at that point, I'm just using my voice to make all of this happen live inside my classroom. There's not a lot of wires I'm tangled with. There's not a lot of buttons I have to mash. I literally walk around and teach class.
So obviously the students would sit in the front like they are there. So you're now going to focus also 100% to the whole class, as opposed to what would typically happen if you have a video system behind you and just one. Then eventually you lose sight of the people that are on that remote, and then the tendency obviously is to only focus on the ones in front. Okay.
That is correct.
So talk a little bit about how can we interact. I noticed there you obviously have a Webex board on the left there as well. So I'm assuming you're showing that to sort of say, hey, look, you can do both. If you want to connect up your computer and you want to use what you already have with a Promethean, it works. It gives you the same type of functionality that we're currently experiencing. But I could also not have to use the computer and directly just use a Webex board connected in the same way. Yes?
Absolutely. So let's take a moment and explore this, because this is where my students get tactily involved in what's going on in the classroom. We've been doing this whiteboard. I'm going to open up another little project for us, Chris. Okay, Webex, share my screen. And I'm going to share with you a map of the United States of America. Now, Chris, we've already talked about where I live. And for those of you who don't remember, it is the great state of Oklahoma. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little card here that has OK on it, right? Now, Chris, I'm going to slide it off the map. And what I would love for you to do is take that sticky note and put it where you think the state of Oklahoma is.
Sure. So I can just, again, I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing, and I can say it's surely over here somewhere, isn't it?
So, Chris, you're at least in the right half of the U.S. because the Mississippi River flows right down through here like this, okay? It is in the western half,
okay,
but you're a little too far west. We're looking for more Midwest.
Oh, I know where it is then. It must be right over here.
Excellent. Now, the thing that I would tell you is about Oklahoma, that it is surrounded by the second largest state in the Union. You know what that state is, Chris? The second largest state?
Texas.
Texas. Okay. Here's Texas, my friend. Oklahoma is just to the north of Texas. Would you please put the tab on Oklahoma? There we go.
Would it be here? Yes.
Yes.
So I can, let me just, I can actually.
Beautiful.
Some more words in there as well.
Thank you very much. So, and Devinder's laughing, right, because he wasn't really sure where Oklahoma was either. It is a flyover state. Right?
But I think, Lance, what this really shows as well, I don't have a touch screen. I'm just using my, I've got a computer here. So, I think it shows the ability, and you can have many of these stickies in many different colors and what have you. It's a great way to get, we often in the enterprise world use that for brainstorming with multiple teams and groups and what have you. But in the classroom, it's so easy for the remote students to then, and everybody's involved, whether it's local, because obviously the students there, you could hand over the pen or whatever and get them to stand up and say, okay, well, you try here. So now we're getting that equity between the kids that you've got in front of you and then kids like me who are sitting, was it 1,500, 2,000 miles from you?
That is correct. And I will tell all of you this who are watching. One of the tips for utilizing interactive video when you're teaching a class is to get your students to be able to non-verbally interact with you and with each other. We've talked about small groups. We have chat capabilities. We have polling capabilities. Obviously, we have annotation capabilities. And so getting students at an individual level, just as if they were physically in the classroom, involved is a key to success for your remote learning, your hybrid learning.
And now, the other interesting, I would say the other interesting thing there, Lance, is you first of all had a blank white piece of canvas basically, and you drew on that, but then you pulled up that picture. So was that something that you had pre-prepared for class and sort of pre-loaded, and is that now saved, or is there a complex method that you have to then go through and save that? How can I work on that as homework, for example, if you assign me homework saying, hey, now give me all the states in the Northeast and name them, and I want to see that, I want to see that tomorrow. How does that work?
Absolutely. So there are several ways that we can do that. First and foremost, how did it get here? The great part about having this amazing tool is that I can bring in any file that I would like to into the engagement. You've already got files on your Google Drive. You have files on your OneDrive. You can simply bring those files directly in by partnering this experience with that. Once that file is here, I opened the file, Chris, and then down at the bottom, I chose the pen tool and began to actually do the annotation, whether it's a website, a PDF doc, or anything else. Now, at this juncture, I can make as many copies of that as I need to for my learners to be able to, once again, individually provide the feedback necessary. So this entire engagement is driven based on the content that you would find on the web.
Okay.
Now, I know that we've gone through a whole lot of information for those of you who are with us on this call, and we thank you for joining us. But before we wrap, Devendra, is there anything that I left out that you would also like to address, my friend?
A couple of things I want to highlight is, number one, what we showcase you in terms of Webex for Learning, the feature set what we have showcased you. This is just the starting. What we want to take it, this whole experience would be where, as I alluded earlier, that you could bring in your devices. Second, if you already have your calendar, maybe you are the one who are using Google Calendar or Outlook, you could simply integrate those calendar integrations with the software. But last but not least, we are also looking at adding more features, more experience. Now, I'll give you one example. I've tons of features to talk about, but I'll give you one example. We talked about that we have these recordings coming in from Webex. Now, with the integration of Webex Assistant, now we could have the automatic notes. So pretty much anytime a teacher is speaking and there is something they want to call out, we can actually show all of the call outs as the notes, and those notes will be available along with the recordings. And in the future, once you have those notes, you could actually collaborate on those notes, because what we are going to do is these notes, we will drop those notes into our classroom collaboration, where now as the students are reading those notes, they may have questions. They can ask those questions and the teacher can respond to that, or the other students can respond to that. That is where what we are trying to bring in is, we are trying to bring in the online learning and continuous collaboration together, what we call the hybrid learning. This is where we think that the whole hybrid learning future is. And this is where, from the Webex, we are providing you all the tools and technologies to enable you for that experience.
So Devinder, let me ask a couple of questions specifically around that to make sure that I understood that. So if I am using Webex Assistant, which I actually am familiar with, obviously on the enterprise side, I could potentially set homework assignments using my voice, and then those would then get going into the LMS systems with that type of connection?
Well, that's a possibility. So
Okay.
I can say that I can definitely say that these are the homework, and then I can talking about this is the homework look like, and then I can integrate that with my Google Classroom, and then it can automatically be dropped in the classrooms.
So my second question, let's say I'm doing a class of history from throughout the 1900s, and at minute 35 there was a discussion about World War II, Winston Churchill. Could I afterwards basically search and say I can't quite remember what we were talking about or what was discussed? Could I afterwards, even A, if I've missed the class, or B, if I'm going to revise for an exam or whatever, could I just type in Winston Churchill and it would then go and take me into that was in this class, minute 35, and take me to that so I can review what was discussed?
You got it, Chris. So essentially, as a student, I'm going to give you a lot more richer capabilities. I'll start from here. So right now, one of the problems as a student I get is, if I have missed some classes, okay, first of all, I should be able to look for the recording only for those classes which I have missed. And if I don't have a time to look at the whole recording, I could actually glance through all the notes. And if I just want to look at the recording for the last 3 minutes or the 3 minutes where we talked about World War II, I can simply go and search for those and actually either play the recording or I can look at the notes. So I'm going to give you all of these capabilities.
That is awesome. Now, Chris, I've got to ask you one closing question before we close this out. I know that we have discussed a lot of different ways to engage, but you know as well as I do that every classroom looks, feels, experiences differently one from another. What is Cisco trying to do to meet those needs in such a great variety of classroom settings?
Yeah, and I think it was interesting because you mentioned at the front you could fit about 10 students in that classroom. Now with going hybrid, you might have big classrooms which have relatively few students in there and small classrooms. And I think the real power with our WebEx rooms is every classroom can be covered with the right device for the right scenario. So we don't just make one device. You have one there that has that wonderful teacher tracking feature. So as you were moving around, we saw that, and that was phenomenal. That's a particular type of system that does that. And then we have others that you can put on top of displays where that could be for a little bit of a smaller classroom, or maybe where the school is a little bit more cost conscious and says, we'll just do it more with an entry level, and it doesn't necessarily have the fluid motion that you see there. It would just snap into you, as you move to different parts of the classroom. And then, we can still see the WebEx board that you have there. I believe that's a 55-inch. We do that in 55, we do that in 70, we do that in 85. So you can either, that combination of having the video separate to the content that you're showing in the front of the class, and having that workflow being integrated. And that's the key thing. You're not cobbling together different things from different places, which then makes the workflow, back to the comment that you made right earlier on, you want to focus on the teaching, not on the technology. And I think part of the challenge that a lot of schools are facing is they're told, go and get the technology, go and get video conferencing, that will solve your problems. Go and get online learning, that will solve your problems. It doesn't, because ultimately, I remember when I took one of the WebEx boards to my son's math teacher when they were still working at home. He said, Chris, I've done everything online and it's great, but I'm missing my kids leaning in. He says, just the ability now to be, in his case, at home, but it can also be the class, to stand up in front of the board like you were doing earlier on, just the ability to be able to do that, he says, is going to change it. Not only for me, because it's less painful for me, because I struggle to be hunched over a laptop for 6 hours a day. I struggle with that. but just for the kids then to see me in the way that they would see me when I'm standing in front of them and teaching when they were all together. I think that's huge. And I also noticed you have our Desk Pro there to your left as well, next to the board. So a great system that behaves very much like the Webex board, is 27 inches, but then can be used at home, or if you're just on your own and you're just beaming out without, again, you having to being hunched up over a laptop. So a wide variety of systems to meet the need, from small breakout rooms to small classrooms to big lecture halls to quite frankly amphitheater type styles if you wanted to go that big.
Awesome. So I guess I want to leave all of you who are viewing with this. There are options. There are amazing opportunities. But teaching and learning should not be an endurance contest. It should be an engagement. And that's what we hope we've been able to bring you during our time together in this session. Thank you, Devinder. Thank you, Chris, for joining me for this live experience. It's been great. It's been educational for me. And thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye. Wow. Can you believe the time went by that fast? I want to take just a moment and say a huge thank you to all of our guests today. I mean, I have learned so much just by interviewing and working with these folks over the last couple of hours that I'm ready to go great guns once again. I'm ready to get another fresh start. And I hope that's where you find yourself too. I know that in a world where things are ever changing and ever shifting, and you have sort of a forced isolation mentality, I know that the silence sometimes can be deafening. And I want you to know that just because you're isolated does not mean that you're alone. If you have any questions or any concerns about the things we've talked about today, or the opportunities that lie in wait for you in leveraging some of these tools, please reach directly to me or to anyone here. My email is LANFORD, @cisco.com. And I just want to be a resource for you, because not only do I get to be teacher, as we've talked about, but I also get to be learner. And I look forward to not only helping you, but learning from you in the days ahead. Thank you so much for your time, and we truly hope this has been an amazing encouragement and eye-opening experience about the future of education.